When I received the email announcing I'd been selected for the prestigious Culinary Institute of Paris scholarship, a full ride worth over $120,000, my first thought wasn't about the gourmet techniques I'd learn or the doors it would open. It was about the family dinner I'd been disinvited from just 2 weeks earlier, when my brother Marcus had smiled his practiced smile and said, "We think it might be better if you skip Dad's retirement party. Your constant talk about cooking. Dreams might dampen the sophisticated atmosphere we're trying to create." Funny how achievement changes everything, especially for people who claimed your passions were just a phase that would never amount to anything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I stared at my laptop screen, reading the acceptance email. For the 5th time, the words remained unchanged. Dear Ms. Rachel Chen, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected from over 5,000 applicants to receive the Culinary Institute of Paris International Excellence Scholarship. My hands were shaking as I reached for my phone, scrolling past the family group chat I'd been excluded from months ago to find Olivia's contact. I got it, I said when she answered, my voice surprisingly steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside me. The scholarship? Rachel, oh my God! My best friend's genuine excitement was a stark contrast to how my family had reacted when I'd first mentioned applying. I knew you could do it. When do you leave for Paris? 4 months. Enough time to wrap things up at the bistro and get my affairs in order. I glanced around my modest apartment, the one I'd fought to afford on a line cook's salary after my parents had made it clear they wouldn't waste money supporting my hobby. The kitchen was my only splurge, not fancy, but functional, with the secondhand professional-grade pans I'd collected over years. We need to celebrate. This is huge! Olivia's voice brought me back to the present moment. It is, I agreed, the reality finally sinking in. But maybe keep it quiet for now? I'm not ready for the family drama yet. Olivia understood immediately. She'd witnessed firsthand how the Chen family operated, with clear favorites and outsiders. My brother Marcus, the successful investment banker with the perfect wife and children, and my sister Amber, the dermatologist with her own thriving practice, were the family success stories. Then there was me, Rachel, the disappointment who'd walked away from college to pursue cooking, as if it were a childish phase rather than a passion that consumed me. After hanging up with Olivia, I sat at my small kitchen table, contemplating how my life had led to this moment. Growing up in our upper-middle-class suburban home, I'd always been the odd one out. While Marcus and Amber excelled in math and science, securing my parents' approval with each academic achievement, I'd struggled through subjects that didn't capture my imagination. The only place I truly came alive was in the kitchen. First, baking with my grandmother before she passed, then experimenting with flavors and techniques whenever I had the house to myself. When I announced after my freshman year of college that I was dropping out of the business program to attend culinary school, the resulting family argument had set the tone for the next 7 years. My father, a banking executive who measured success in titles and salary figures, had called it throwing your life away on a service industry job. My mother had cried, asking where she'd gone wrong as a parent. Marcus had looked on with that mixture of pity and superiority that would become his default expression around me. Only Amber had shown a flicker of understanding, though she eventually sided with our parents when it became clear which way the family winds were blowing. You could at least get your business degree first, she'd suggested, then pursue cooking, if you still want to. Be practical, Rachel. But passion isn't practical. It burns and consumes and demands attention. For me, cooking wasn't a fallback option. It was the only path that made sense. So I'd walked away from my parents' financial support, pieced together culinary school through scholarships, loans, and working brutal hours at local restaurants, and slowly built my reputation in the region's food scene. Now, at 27, I was the sous chef at Terroir, a small but respected farm-to-table bistro known for creative, technique-driven dishes that punched above the restaurant's modest appearance. Chef Diego had taken a chance on me 3 years ago, mentoring me with a mixture of brutal criticism and genuine investment in my growth. It was Diego who had pushed me to apply for the Paris scholarship, something I would never have considered possible without his insistence. "You have the hands and the palate," he'd said in his blunt way. "What you need is the global perspective and the network. Paris will give you both." The memory of his rare praise made me smile as I opened my laptop again, responding to the acceptance email with appropriate gratitude and confirming my intention to accept the scholarship. Then I made a second coffee and began listing what needed to be done before I left for Paris. Tell Diego and give notice at Terroir. Find a subletter for my apartment. Apply for a passport. Learn basic French beyond kitchen terminology. And eventually, tell my family, though that particular task I placed at the bottom of my list, despite knowing I couldn't put it off forever. News traveled quickly through our extended family and social circles, and the last thing I wanted was for my parents to hear about my scholarship from someone else. The next morning, I arrived at Terroir earlier than usual, hoping to catch Diego before the daily frenzy began. I found him at his desk in the cramped office, reviewing invoices with a frown that softened slightly when I appeared in the doorway. "I got the scholarship," I said simply, knowing he preferred directness over dramatic announcements. He set down his papers and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, something like pride mixed with satisfaction. "Of course. You did. Your test submission was excellent. When do you leave?" "September. I'll need to give my notice here, but I wanted to discuss the transition." Diego waved his hand dismissively. "We'll figure it out. This is good, Rachel. This is necessary for where you want to go." He leaned back in his chair, studying me. "Your family? They will be proud now, yes?" The question hit a nerve. "They don't know yet." He nodded, understanding, in his eyes. Diego came from a long line of restaurant workers, but his parents had wanted him to become an accountant, something respectable with steady hours. He'd defied them to pursue cooking, creating a rift that took years to heal. "They will either see your worth now, or they never will," he said with the brutal honesty I'd come to value from him. "Either way, you know your worth. That's what matters." I nodded, grateful for his understanding. "I should start prep." "Yes. And Rachel?" he called as I turned to leave. "We will have a proper celebration with the staff before you go. You deserve the recognition." Those simple words of acknowledgement meant more than any elaborate praise. In the kitchen, I was valued for my skills, my work ethic, my creativity, not measured against arbitrary standards of success or found wanting because my path differed from the expected. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Secured a subletter for my apartment, a culinary student who couldn't believe her luck at finding an affordable place with a decent kitchen. I applied for my passport and downloaded French language apps that I practiced during my limited free time. I created detailed notes for whoever would replace me at Terroir, documenting the quirks of our equipment and the preferences of our regular clients. What I didn't do was tell my family. Every time I considered making the call, something stopped me. The memory of too many dismissive comments, too many invitations rescinded because my work schedule complicated family gatherings. Too many times my culinary achievements were treated as cute hobbies rather than professional accomplishments. It was Amber who finally forced my hand, texting on a rare Sunday when I wasn't working. "Mom wants to confirm you're not coming to Dad's retirement dinner. Need to finalize catering numbers." I stared at the message, a familiar mixture of hurt and anger rising in my chest. Of course, they'd assume I wouldn't attend. Probably hadn't even sent a proper invitation. I took a deep breath and called my sister instead of texting back. "Rachel?" She sounded surprised to hear my voice. "I was just checking about Dad's dinner." "I didn't realize I was invited," I said, keeping my tone neutral rather than accusatory. Oh, a pause. I thought Mom discussed it with you. It's at the Kingsford Club, very formal. 4 courses, speeches, about 100 guests. Dad's colleagues and clients mostly. The subtext was clear. Not your scene, not your people. A place where you wouldn't fit in. Actually, I said, the decision crystallizing as I spoke, I'd like to come. Dad's retirement is important. And I would be leaving the country soon after. This might be the last family event I'd attend for quite some time. Really? Amber? Couldn't quite keep the surprise from her voice. That's great. It's next Saturday at 7. Black tie optional. I'll be there. I hesitated, then added, Actually, I have some news to share with the family. I've received a significant opportunity. What kind of opportunity? Her tone shifted to cautious interest. I'd rather share it with everyone at once. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I wasn't ready to have my achievement filtered through Amber's interpretation before I could present it myself. All right, mysterious, she said with forced lightness. I'll let Mom know you're coming. She'll be surprised. After hanging up, I leaned against my kitchen counter, heart racing faster than it had during the most chaotic dinner service. Just the thought of facing my family en masse with their judgments and expectations was enough to trigger my fight-or-flight response. But I couldn't leave for Paris without telling them, and doing it at a public event might actually work in my favor. They'd be less likely to dismiss my news outright if they were concerned about appearances. The week that followed was a gauntlet of emotions and logistics. I requested the rare Saturday night off from Diego, who granted it with a knowing look. I searched for an appropriate outfit, eventually finding a sleek black jumpsuit that managed to look both elegant and confident. I rehearsed how I would announce my news, trying to find words that conveyed the magnitude of the achievement without sounding like I was seeking their approval. By the time Saturday arrived, I was a bundle of nerves disguised beneath careful makeup and styled hair. The Kingsford Club was exactly as pretentious as its name suggested, all dark wood paneling, oil paintings of stern-faced men, and staff who moved with practiced deference. I gave my name to the host, half expecting to be told I wasn't on the list, but was smoothly directed to the private dining room where my father's retirement celebration was taking place. I paused at the entrance, taking in the scene. Round tables, draped in crisp white linens, filled the space, each centered with tasteful floral arrangements. A small stage held a podium, presumably for the speeches that would come later. At the far end, my parents were greeting guests, my mother elegant in navy blue, my father distinguished in his tuxedo. Marcus worked the room with practiced ease, his wife Heather at his side, both looking like they'd stepped from the pages of a luxury magazine. Amber spotted me first, her eyebrows rising slightly at my appearance before she crossed the room to intercept me. "You look different," she said, surveying my outfit and makeup with subtle scrutiny. "Thank you, I think," I replied with a small smile. "It's been a while since I've dressed for something other than the kitchen. Mom and Dad are over there. They've been greeting everyone as they arrive." She hesitated. "Just maybe wait until after dinner to share your news? Dad's colleagues are giving speeches, and there's a whole program planned." The implication was clear. My news wasn't significant enough to disrupt their carefully orchestrated evening. I nodded, not in agreement, but in acknowledgement, and made my way across the room to where my parents stood. "Rachel." My mother's surprise was evident, despite her social smile. "You made it. And you look so put together." The faint tone of astonishment stung, but I pushed past it. "Hi, Mom. Dad. Congratulations on your retirement." My father accepted my brief hug with the same stiff formality he'd always shown me. "Thank you for coming. I understand you had to take time off from your job." Even now, he couldn't bring himself to acknowledge my profession with any degree of respect. I bit back the defensive response that rose to my lips. "I wouldn't miss it," I said instead. "This is an important milestone." We exchanged a few more minutes of stilted conversation before they turned to greet more arriving guests, and I was directed to my assigned table, far from the family table at the front, instead placed with distant relatives and friends' adult children. The message couldn't have been clearer if they'd posted a sign. Periphery, not inner circle. As I took my seat, I noticed Marcus watching me from across the room, that familiar expression of condescending amusement on his face. When our eyes met, he raised his champagne glass in mock salute. I straightened my shoulders and returned the gesture with deliberate confidence that I didn't quite feel. Dinner was exquisite by conventional standards. Perfectly cooked filet mignon, truffle-infused risotto, a chocolate dessert with gold leaf. But to my trained palate, it was safe, predictable cuisine designed to impress rather than inspire. I found myself mentally redesigning each course, imagining how I might elevate the flavors while maintaining the elegance the occasion demanded. The thought reminded me that despite my family's perception, I wasn't an imposter in this world. I understood fine dining from the inside out, had created dishes worthy of Michelin attention according to Diego, and now the Culinary Institute's selection committee. My exclusion from the family's inner circle wasn't because I couldn't belong. Here, it was because I'd chosen a different path to excellence. After dessert came the speeches. Colleagues praised my father's business acumen and leadership. Golf partners shared humorous anecdotes about his competitive nature. Marcus delivered a polished tribute to his mentor and role model, earning appreciative laughter and nods from the audience. Then, unexpectedly, the MC announced, "And now, a few words from Charles Chen's daughter, Amber." I watched my sister approach the podium, elegant in her designer dress, the perfect professional daughter. Her speech was heartfelt, if somewhat generic, touching on our father's dedication to family and how he'd inspired both his children to pursue excellence. Both his children. As if I didn't exist. I felt a flush of heat rise to my face as I realized that in this carefully curated narrative of our family, I had been simply erased rather than acknowledged as the disappointment. When Amber finished to warm applause, the MC asked, "Would anyone else like to share memories or congratulations?" Before I could second-guess myself, I raised my hand and stood. A flicker of alarm crossed my mother's face as I made my way to the podium. "Hello," I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "For those who don't know me, I'm Rachel Chen, Charles and Patricia's daughter." A ripple of surprise moved through the room. Many clearly hadn't realized there was another Chen offspring. I saw Marcus lean over to whisper something to Heather, both watching me with wary curiosity. "I won't take much time," I continued, "but I wanted to congratulate my father on this significant milestone. Dad, your dedication to your career has always been an inspiration, even to those of us who chose different professional paths." I paused, meeting his eyes across the room. For once, he was looking at me with his full attention, perhaps concerned about what I might say next. "You taught us that excellence requires sacrifice and commitment, lessons I've carried into my own career. And speaking of careers, I'm pleased to share that I've recently been selected from over 5,000 international applicants to receive the Culinary Institute of Paris Full Excellence Scholarship, a program valued at more than $120,000, awarded to only 5 chefs worldwide each year." A murmur of impressed reactions rippled through the room. I saw surprise register on faces throughout the audience, but I kept my focus on my family. My mother's mouth had formed a perfect O of shock. Amber was rapidly recalculating something behind her carefully composed expression. Marcus had lost his smug smile completely. "I'll be leaving for Paris in September to begin this 18-month program, working under some of the world's most renowned culinary masters. It's an incredible honor, and I'm grateful that the foundation my parents provided gave me the confidence to pursue excellence in my chosen field. This last part was largely fiction. They'd provided nothing but obstacles. But I wouldn't err. Family grievances at my father's retirement dinner. I was better than that. Congratulations again, Dad. I wish you a retirement filled with new adventures and satisfactions. I stepped away from the podium to a round of applause significantly, warmer than I'd expected. As I returned to my seat, I caught snippets of conversation from nearby tables. Didn't know the Chens had another daughter. Paris scholarship sounds incredibly prestigious. Must be quite talented to be selected from thousands. For the first time in a Chen family gathering, the whispers about me weren't pitying or dismissive. I kept my expression composed, though inside I felt a complicated mixture of vindication, lingering hurt, and a new emotion I was still identifying. Perhaps the liberation of finally being seen for who I actually was, not who they'd wanted me to be. The remainder of the evening unfolded in a surreal blur. People who had never shown interest in me before sought me out to ask about the scholarship and my culinary career. Several of my father's colleagues mentioned their connections to restaurant investors and Michelin-starred establishments in Europe, offering to make introductions. Through it all, my immediate family kept their distance, huddled in what appeared to be an intense discussion. I caught my mother glancing my way repeatedly, her expression unreadable. Marcus seemed to be holding forth about something, gesturing emphatically while Amber looked increasingly uncomfortable. It was my father who finally approached me as the evening was winding down, catching me alone near the bar where I was ordering a sparkling water. "That was quite an announcement," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "I thought the occasion called for sharing significant news," I replied, equally measured. "Congratulations again on your retirement." He studied me with an expression I'd rarely seen directed my way, something like reassessment. "This Paris scholarship, it's really as prestigious as you described?" "Yes." The selection process took 8 months. The final round included preparing a tasting menu for a panel of Michelin-starred chefs and culinary critics. He nodded slowly. "Your mother is surprised. We both are. You never mentioned applying for something of this caliber." The unspoken question hung between us. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Would you have been interested?" I asked quietly. The last time I shared a professional achievement, when Terroir received its regional recognition and my contribution was mentioned in Culinary Quarterly, Mom changed the subject to Amber's new medical office. "And you asked if I was still planning to get a real career eventually." A flash of discomfort crossed his face. "Perhaps we've been short-sighted about your cooking pursuits." "My career," I corrected gently but firmly. "It's not a pursuit or a hobby, Dad. It's my profession, my passion, and now apparently my ticket to international recognition." Before he could respond, my mother appeared at his side, her social smile firmly in place, though her eyes were calculating. "Rachel, darling, everyone is talking about your news. Why didn't you tell us immediately? We would have hosted a celebration dinner." The revisionist history was so breathtaking I almost laughed. Instead, I smiled politely. "It's still sinking. In for me too. I only received confirmation recently." "Well, we must have a family dinner before you leave for Paris. Next weekend at the house? I'll invite everyone. Make it a proper send-off." The sudden warmth after years of chilly disapproval was jarring. "That's very thoughtful, but I work weekends at the restaurant. Perhaps a weekday." Of course, whatever works with your schedule." She patted my arm with newfound appreciation. "This is such exciting news. The Culinary Institute of Paris. It sounds so prestigious." "It is," I confirmed. The alumni network includes some of the most influential chefs in the world." "Influential," she repeated, the word clearly registering in a way that passionate or talented never had when I'd used them to describe my work. "Well, we're very proud. Aren't we, Charles?" My father nodded. though his expression remained more thoughtful than effusive. "It seems we've underestimated the opportunities in your field." In that moment, I saw my family clearly, perhaps more clearly than ever before. Their sudden interest wasn't about my happiness or even genuine pride in my accomplishment. It was about the external validation, the prestige, the fact that others in their social circle were impressed. My passion hadn't changed. My talent hadn't changed, but the perception of my status had shifted dramatically. And that, apparently, was what had always mattered most. "I should say goodnight to a few people before I leave," I said, needing space to process the whiplash of their changed attitudes. "Thank you for including me tonight." As I moved through the room, exchanging contact information with several genuinely interested guests and saying polite goodbyes, I noticed Marcus watching me with an expression I'd never seen from him before. Something almost like wariness, as if I'd suddenly become a variable he couldn't quite calculate. When I finally left the Kingsford Club, stepping into the cool, night air, I felt strangely light, as if I'd set down a heavy burden I'd been carrying for years. The burden of seeking approval that would never come, at least not for the right reasons. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "How did it go?" "Disaster scale of 110? I smiled as I typed my response. "Surprisingly, not a disaster, more of a revelation. Can I call you tomorrow? It's a lot to process." Her reply came quickly. "Of course. Proud of you no matter what happened in there." And that was the difference, wasn't it? Some people valued you for who you were, regardless of external markers of success. Others only saw your worth when it came with validation they recognized. As I drove home to my modest apartment with its cherished, well-used kitchen, I felt something unexpected taking root. Not just vindication or even satisfaction, but a genuine sense of freedom. For so long, I'd carried the weight of being the family disappointment, the black sheep who'd chosen the wrong path. But now I understood with perfect clarity. There had never been anything wrong with my path. The only wrong had been in seeking validation from people who measured success by such limited metrics. In 4 months, I would be in Paris, building the next phase of my culinary career among people who understood and respected the craft. And if my family wanted to be part of that journey now, well, that would require some significant changes in how we related to each other. Because while my heart had always been open to genuine connection with them, I now knew my worth far too well to accept anything less. The days following my father's retirement dinner unfolded like scenes from an alternate reality where I suddenly mattered to my family. My phone, which had previously gone silent for weeks at a time except for obligatory holiday acknowledgments, now lit up constantly with messages from my parents and siblings. My mother called the very next morning, her voice carrying that bright, society woman enthusiasm she typically reserved for discussing Marcus's financial achievements or Amber's medical practice. "Rachel, darling, I've been thinking about your Paris opportunity. We should celebrate properly before you leave. I'm thinking a dinner party at the house. We could invite the Blakemores. Did you know their daughter married a French hotelier? They have connections in Paris that might be useful to you." I held the phone slightly away from my ear, trying to process this sudden maternal interest in my career networking. This was the same woman who, just 6 months earlier, had introduced me to her friends as our Rachel, still figuring things out, despite my established position as sous chef at a respected restaurant. That's thoughtful, Mom. But I don't need socialite connections in Paris. The Institute provides all the professional networking I'll need. Oh. She sounded momentarily thrown before rallying. Well, we should still celebrate. What about next? Thursday? Your father can move some things around and I'll make sure Marcus and Amber are available. I checked my calendar, where most days were marked with my terroir shifts. I can do Thursday if we make it an early dinner. I have prep to buy. Oversee starting at 7 the next morning. Early. Yes, I suppose we can do that. The faint note of disapproval in her voice was familiar. My hospitality industry hours had always been an inconvenience to their corporate 9-to-5 schedules. 5:30 then? We finalized the details, and I hung up feeling strangely disoriented. For years, I'd longed for my parents to take an interest in my culinary career, to acknowledge the legitimacy of my chosen path. Now that it was happening, I couldn't shake the sense that their enthusiasm was directed not at me or my passion, but at the external validation the scholarship represented. My suspicions were confirmed when Marcus called that afternoon, something that hadn't happened spontaneously in at least 2 years. "So, little sister Paris." His voice carried that mixture of charm and calculation that served him so well in investment banking. "Quite the coup. Why didn't you mention you were in the running for something this significant?" I stirred the experimental sauce reduction I was working on in my home kitchen, phone cradled against my shoulder. "Would you have been interested, Marcus? The last time I tried to tell you about a culinary competition I'd placed in, you changed the subject to your new Mercedes." He laughed, a sound designed to acknowledge without admitting fault. "Fair enough, but this is different. It's international, prestigious, the real deal." "My work was the real deal before Paris too," I pointed out. "The only difference is now it comes with external validation you recognize." A brief silence followed before Marcus shifted tactics. "Listen, I might have some contacts. That could be useful to you. A client of mine has invested in several high-end Parisian restaurants. I could make an introduction." The offer was surprising. Marcus had never shown the slightest interest in helping advance my career before. That's unexpectedly generous of you." "Well, we're family," he said, as if that explained the sudden shift. "And it sounds like you're going places. Smart to get in on the ground floor." There it was, the transactional thinking that defined so much of my brother's approach to relationships. I was now worth investing in because I might yield returns. "I appreciate the thought," I said carefully. "Right now, I'm focused on preparing for the Institute's program. Their placement rate for graduates is nearly perfect, so I'll have plenty of opportunities through their network." Sure, but personal connections never hurt? Think about it." He paused. "Oh, and Heather was wondering if you'd be open to doing some menu consulting for a charity gala she's chairing next month. Now that you've got this Paris credential, it would add a nice touch to the event materials." I nearly laughed at the audacity. The Paris credential wasn't even active yet, and more importantly, Heather had previously dismissed my career as playing with food at a family gathering. "I'm actually quite busy wrapping things up at Terroir before I leave. But I'm happy to recommend some excellent catering options." "Right, of course you're busy." The slight edge in his voice suggested he wasn't used to having his networking propositions declined. "Well, think about those introductions. The offer stands." After hanging up, I stood in my kitchen staring at the simmering reduction, which had reached the perfect consistency while I was distracted by Marcus's call. The sauce, like my career, had developed beautifully regardless of my family's attention or approval. The realization was both liberating and a little sad. My phone pinged with a text from Amber. "Heard Mom's planning dinner Thursday. I can pick you up if you want. Might be nice to talk before." This was new. Amber and I hadn't driven together to a family event since before I left college. While not as openly dismissive of my culinary career as our parents and Marcus, she'd maintained a careful distance, as if my black sheep status might somehow contaminate her golden child narrative if she associated with me too closely. "Sure," I texted back. "That would be nice." The following days passed in a blur of activity. At Terroir, I began the process of documenting systems and training others to take over my responsibilities. Chef Diego had begun interviewing for my replacement. But in the meantime, my workload had increased rather than decreased. Several regular customers, upon hearing I was leaving for Paris, requested special tasting menus before my departure, keeping our kitchen busier than usual for a summer season. Between shifts, I handled the mounting paperwork for the Paris program. Visa applications, housing arrangements, medical clearances, and the endless forms that accompanied international study. I practiced my French during prep work, listening, to language lessons while I broke down vegetables and butchered proteins. Thursday arrived with a strange sense of anticipation mixed with wariness. I hadn't been to my parents' home for a family-only dinner in over a year. Previous visits had been weighted with subtle criticisms and pointed comparisons to my siblings' achievements. Would this dinner be different now that I had the validation of the Paris scholarship? Or would it simply introduce new forms of judgment? Amber picked me up at 4:45, pulling her sleek Audi into the cracked driveway of my apartment building with a studied casualness that couldn't quite hide her discomfort at the surroundings. Unlike Marcus, who made no effort to disguise his disdain for my modest lifestyle, Amber affected a progressive open-mindedness that never quite rang true. "Your neighborhood has some great character," she offered as I slid into the passenger seat, the leather cool against my skin despite the summer heat. "That's one way to describe it," I replied with a small smile. "It's affordable and close enough to terroir that I can walk when the weather's decent." She nodded, navigating back into traffic with the same careful precision she applied to everything. Amber had always been the peacekeeper in our family, the one who smoothed rough edges and mediated conflicts. It had made her an excellent dermatologist, caring but detached, focused on surface healing. "So," she began after a few moments of silence, "Paris. That's incredible, Rachel. Truly. Thank you." I studied her profile, trying to gauge her sincerity. "I'm still processing it myself." "I can imagine." She signaled for a turn with unnecessary advance notice. I looked up the institute after the retirement dinner. The acceptance rate is lower than most Ivy League medical schools. You must have impressed them tremendously. The acknowledgement of the achievement's difficulty surprised me. The final round was intense. 8 hours of cooking under observation, with mystery ingredients and technique challenges, plus interviews in both English and French. God, sounds like surgical boards with knives. She glanced at me with what appeared to be genuine respect. I don't think I realized how rigorous culinary selection could be. Most people don't. I looked out the window as familiar neighborhoods passed by. That's been part of the challenge. Convincing people that what I do requires as much skill, training, and dedication as traditional professions. Amber was quiet for a moment, turning onto the tree-lined street where we'd grown up. "I think I owe you an apology, Rachel." This was unexpected. "For what?" "For not standing up for you more. With the family." She slowed as we approached our parents' sprawling colonial home. "I knew how much your culinary career meant to you, but I never really defended your choice. It was easier to go along with Mom and Dad's narrative." The admission hung in the air between us as she pulled into the circular driveway, taking her spot beside our parents' matching luxury sedans. The honesty was refreshing, if long overdue. "Why the change of heart now?" I asked, genuinely curious. Amber turned off the engine but made no move to exit the car. "Partly seeing how everyone's attitude flipped the minute your work received external validation. It was illuminating." She shook her head slightly. "And partly a conversation I had with one of my medical school classmates who left practice to become a documentary filmmaker. Her work recently won at Sundance, and she said something that stuck with me. That she's the same person with the same passion and talent she had when her family was ashamed of her career change, but now they're suddenly proud because strangers applauded. I felt a surge of unexpected connection with my sister. That sounds familiar. I imagine it does. She met my eyes directly. "For what it's worth, I am genuinely happy for you. Not because of the prestige, but because you fought for something you believed in, despite everyone telling you it was a mistake. That takes a kind of courage I'm not sure I have." The acknowledgement brought a lump to my throat. Of all the reactions from my family in the past week, This was the first that felt directed at me as a person rather than at the external validation of my talent. "Thank you, Amber. That means a lot." She nodded, a silent understanding passing between us before she reached for her door handle. "Ready to face the new and improved Chen family enthusiasm?" I laughed despite my lingering apprehension. "As ready as I'll ever be." We walked into the house together, greeted by the uncharacteristic sight of my mother in the kitchen, supervising the arrangement of what appeared to be catered hors d'oeuvres. She looked up with a bright smile that momentarily faltered as she took in my appearance. I'd come directly from a morning shift at Terroir and was dressed casually in dark jeans and a simple blouse rather than the business casual attire typically expected for family dinners. "Rachel, darling, and Amber, perfect timing. The caterers have just finished setting up." "You ordered catering?" I couldn't keep the surprise from my voice. In the past, my mother had made pointed comments about how I should handle the cooking for family gatherings, since it's your thing. "Well, I could hardly ask a Paris-bound chef to cook her own celebration dinner," she replied with a laugh that sounded rehearsed. "Besides, this is Le Pont's new summer menu. I thought you might appreciate their approach." Le Pont was among the most expensive restaurants in the city, known more for its celebrity clientele than its culinary innovation. I'd eaten there once, on a rare date, and found the food technically flawless but creatively uninspired. Exactly the kind of establishment that impressed people who equated price with quality. "How thoughtful," I said, matching her social smile with one of my own. "Everything looks beautiful." My father and Marcus emerged from the study, each carrying crystal tumblers of what was likely the expensive scotch my father reserved for significant occasions. In the past, this had included Marcus's promotions and partnership announcements, Amber's medical school graduation, and various financial milestones. Never anything related to my career. "Rachel." My father nodded in acknowledgement, his expression more appraising than warm. "Good to see you." "You too, Dad." I accepted the glass of white wine my mother pressed into my hand. "Thanks for arranging this dinner." "Your mother's doing, but well-deserved from what I understand." He took a contemplative sip of his scotch. "I've been looking into this Culinary Institute. Their alumni network is quite impressive." Of course he had. My father approached everything as a potential business connection, a habit that had served him well in his banking career and shaped his evaluation of virtually all human endeavors. "The professional opportunities after graduation are substantial." I agreed, speaking his language rather than trying to explain again the artistic and personal fulfillment that had always been my primary motivation. I mentioned to Rachel that I might be able to introduce her to some of my clients with Parisian restaurant connections. Marcus interjected, positioning himself as the helpful, connected older brother, a role he'd never previously attempted. With me. "Excellent thinking," my father approved. "Networks are essential in any industry." "Rachel was saying the Institute provides quite extensive professional connections," Amber commented, glancing at me with the barest hint of a knowing smile. "Yes, but personal introductions always have more impact," my mother chimed in, ushering us toward the dining room. "Which reminds me, Rachel, the Winthrops will be at the country club benefit next week. Their son, you remember Thomas, he was a few years ahead of you in school. He works for an international hotel group with several Michelin-starred restaurants. You should come as my guest." I nearly choked on my wine. My mother had never, in all my years as a chef, invited me to a social event where I might network professionally. The sudden interest in promoting my career felt as disorienting as it was transparently motivated by the scholarship's prestige. "I appreciate the invitation, but I'm scheduled at Terroir that evening. We're short-staffed until my replacement is trained." "Surely they can manage without you for one evening," my mother pressed. "This is about your future." "My professional reputation is built on reliability as much as skill," I replied evenly. "I won't leave my team understaffed during service." My father nodded with unexpected approval. "Professional integrity matters. The Winthrops will be around after your shift ends." It was perhaps the first time he'd acknowledged any aspect of my culinary career as professionally legitimate. The validation I'd once desperately craved now felt strangely hollow, coming only after external authorities had deemed my work worthy of recognition. Dinner proceeded with an undercurrent of surreal politeness. Dishes I would have deconstructed and critiqued in professional detail were met with enthusiastic praise from my family members, who suddenly valued my culinary opinion as authoritative. Conversations that would previously have excluded me now centered around my plans for Paris, where I would live, what techniques I hoped to master, which prominent chefs I might study under. "Will you specialize in French cuisine, or explore other European traditions while you're there?" my father asked, showing more interest in my culinary direction than he had in the entire 7 years of my career. "The program is comprehensive, but I'm particularly interested in fusion techniques that incorporate Asian influences," I explained. "There's a growing movement toward blending traditional French methods with flavors and approaches from other culinary traditions, like those Korean French fusion places that have been opening downtown," Amber offered. "I tried one last month. It was fascinating what they did with traditional banchan using French preparation methods." I looked at her with surprise. "You went to Maison Kim? I've been wanting to try their tasting menu." "We should go before you leave," she suggested, with what seemed like genuine enthusiasm. My treat. That would be great, actually. The moment of authentic connection was interrupted by Marcus, who hadn't yet found his angle in the culinary conversation. "Speaking of Asian fusion, one of my clients is looking to invest in restaurant concepts. If you developed something along those lines after Paris, I could potentially connect you with capital." The proposal was so unexpected, I momentarily lost my practiced composure. "You want to invest in a restaurant concept? From me?" "Well, with your Paris credential and the right business structure, it could be an interesting opportunity," he replied, his expression calculating. "Especially with the family connection. We could position it as a compelling narrative for marketing." And there it was. I wasn't being valued for my culinary vision or skills, but for the marketable narrative of the formerly dismissed sister who'd proven everyone wrong. My success wasn't mine to define. It was being reframed as a Chen family success story with a convenient redemption arc. "I haven't even started the program yet," I said carefully. "And my goals after graduation are still taking shape, but I'll keep your offer in mind." My mother, perhaps sensing my discomfort, steered the conversation toward logistics. "Have you found housing in Paris yet? The 7th arrondissement has some lovely apartments, though I imagine they're quite expensive on a student budget." "The Institute helps with housing arrangements," I explained. "They have relationships with several residences that cater to culinary students. Basic but convenient to the school and affordable within the scholarship stipend. Well, if you need any supplementary funds, your father and I would be happy to help," she offered with unprecedented generosity. "We wouldn't want financial constraints to limit your experience in Paris." I set down my fork, the contrast too stark to ignore. "That's very generous, Mom. Especially considering I was told 3 years ago that you wouldn't waste money helping me pay for an advanced pastry certification because it was throwing good money after bad on a career path that wasn't serious." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. My mother flushed slightly, while my father studied his wine glass with sudden interest. "Well, circumstances change," my mother finally said, her tone artificially bright. "We can recognize now that you're on a viable professional track." "What's changed?" I asked directly. "My passion hasn't. My talent hasn't. My work ethic hasn't. The only difference is that now my career choice has been validated by an institution you recognize as prestigious." "That's not entirely fair, Rachel," my father interjected. "We've always wanted what's best for you. We were concerned about the stability and advancement opportunities in the culinary field. This scholarship demonstrates that your particular path has more potential than we initially understood." His response was perfectly reasonable on the surface, Yet it still located the change in my career's legitimacy rather than in their perspective. In their narrative, they hadn't been wrong to dismiss my passion. They'd been prudently skeptical, until presented with evidence of its viability. "I understand," I said, not wanting to derail what was, despite everything, the most civil family dinner I'd experienced in years. "And I appreciate your support now." Amber caught my eye across the table with a look of quiet understanding. She'd witnessed years of subtle and not-so-subtle undermining of my choices, the consistent message that my passion was less valuable, less serious, less worthy of respect than my siblings' more conventional paths. "Tell us more about the actual selection process," she suggested, redirecting the conversation to safer ground. "You mentioned mystery ingredients and technique challenges." Grateful for the shift, I described the grueling final selection round in detail, the rising intensity as hours passed, the technical challenges that required both classical training and creative problem-solving, the nerve-wracking moment when the judges deliberated while we waited. As I spoke, I noticed my family listening with what appeared to be genuine interest and respect. Whether motivated by the scholarship's prestige or a genuine reevaluation of my talent, their attention felt like a strange victory, one I'd stopped actively seeking years ago when I realized that external validation would never substitute for the internal fulfillment my work provided. The evening concluded with promises of future gatherings before my September departure. A Sunday brunch my mother wanted to organize with extended family, a potential dinner with my father's business associates who had restaurant industry connections, an invitation from Marcus and Heather for drinks at their country club. As Amber drove me home, the suburban streets giving way to my more urban neighborhood, I found myself reflecting on the evening's undercurrents. "They're really trying in their way," Amber commented, breaking the thoughtful silence. "Even if their way is completely wrapped up in status and connections." "I know," I admitted. "And part of me appreciates the effort. But there's another part that can't help wondering where this support was when I really needed it. When I was struggling through culinary school, working double shifts to make rent, trying to build a reputation without any of the family connections Marcus had in finance or you had in medicine." She nodded, her expression thoughtful in the glow of passing streetlights. "That's fair. The conditional nature of their acceptance is pretty transparent. The thing is," I continued, organizing thoughts that had been swirling since my scholarship. "Announcement. I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago, desperate for their approval and validation. I built my career without their support. I discovered my worth without their recognition. Now that they want to claim connection to my success, I'm not sure how to respond." Amber pulled up outside my apartment building, turning to face me fully. "You get to set the terms now, Rachel. That's what's changed. They've finally realized you have something they want, association with success they understand, and that gives you leverage you've never had before in the family dynamic." Her assessment was surprisingly astute. "When did you get so insightful about family power dynamics?" She smiled wryly. "Therapy. 2 years and counting. Turns out being the good daughter comes with its own complicated baggage." This glimpse of vulnerability from my perpetually composed sister caught me off guard. I never thought about it that way. Most people don't. She shrugged slightly. "Look, I'm not saying you should be vindictive or hold grudges, but you've earned the right to establish boundaries around how and when the family gets to be part of your success story. On your terms, not theirs." As I climbed the stairs to my apartment after saying goodnight to Amber, her words resonated deeply. For years, I'd been defined by my family's narrative: the impractical daughter, the disappointment, the black sheep who'd chosen a non-prestigious path. Now that narrative was being hastily rewritten without any acknowledgement of its previous harmful iterations. I unlocked my door, stepping into the modest space that had witnessed countless hours of recipe testing, culinary research, and quiet determination. On my refrigerator hung the official acceptance letter from the Culinary Institute of Paris, the external validation that had suddenly made my passion legitimate in my family's eyes. Beside it was a handwritten note from Chef Diego from years earlier, when I'd first joined Terroir's kitchen. "Talent without tenacity is wasted. You have both. Use them well." That validation, from someone who recognized my worth based on the quality of my work rather than its prestige, had sustained me through years of family dismissal. It was authentic in a way my family's newfound enthusiasm could never be, because it had been offered when I had nothing to give in return except my best effort. As I prepared for bed, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Thinking about a small gathering next weekend to introduce you to some of our friends with European connections. Let me know what day works with your schedule." I set the phone down without responding immediately, feeling strangely powerful in my hesitation. Amber was right. I now had leverage I'd never possessed before in our family dynamic. The question was how to use it, not to punish or extract vengeance, but to establish a healthier relationship moving forward, one based on mutual respect rather than conditional acceptance. Whatever I decided, one thing was certain. I would never again measure my worth by their assessment. I'd built my culinary career despite their doubt and dismissal, and I would continue to define my success on my own terms, with or without their approval. The scholarship to Paris wasn't a validation of my worth. It was simply a recognition of the talent and dedication I'd always possessed. The real transformation wasn't in my credentials or future prospects, but in my absolute certainty that I no longer needed my family to believe in me. I already believed in myself, and that was enough. Paris in September carried a certain magic, the summer heat giving way to crisp mornings, the light softer and more golden as it filtered through centuries-old architecture. As I wheeled my 2 carefully packed suitcases from the taxi to the entrance of my new residence building in the 11th arrondissement, I felt a surge of conflicting emotions: exhilaration, anxiety, determination, and a strange sense of peaceful certainty. The past 3 months had been a whirlwind of preparations, goodbyes, and navigating my family's increasingly persistent attempts to insert themselves into my culinary journey. My mother had indeed organized that small gathering she'd mentioned, which turned out to be a 30-person cocktail party where I was presented like a prize exhibit to various family connections with tangential ties to the European culinary world. Marcus had increased the frequency of his calls, each conversation circling back to potential business opportunities involving my brand potential after graduation. My father, in his more restrained way, had arranged a lunch with a banking colleague, whose son-in-law owned a restaurant group, a meeting that was equal parts awkward and presumptuous. Only Amber had maintained a genuine connection, taking me to Maison Kim as promised, and showing actual interest in my passion, rather than just my potential professional value. Now, standing before the unassuming building that would be my home, for the next 18 months, I felt thousands of miles from those complications, and not just in geographic terms. I'd made a conscious decision before leaving to limit my family's involvement in this chapter of my life, not cutting them off entirely, but establishing clear boundaries around communication and expectations. Mademoiselle Chen, a middle-aged woman with a practical bob and efficient movements, approached from the building entrance. "I am Madame Rousseau, the residence coordinator. Welcome to Paris." "Merci beaucoup," I replied, grateful for the hours of practice that made my French pronunciation passable, if not yet fluid. "C'est un plaisir d'être ici." She nodded approvingly at my effort before switching to accented English. "Your apartment is prepared. Let me show you the way." The residence was designed specifically for culinary students and young professionals. Functional rather than luxurious, with small but well-equipped kitchenettes in each unit and larger communal cooking spaces on the ground floor. My apartment was on the 4th floor, a compact studio with tall windows that allowed in streams of Parisian light, illuminating the simple furnishings and newly renovated bathroom. The institute begins orientation tomorrow at 8, Madame. Rousseau informed me, handing over a packet of information along with my keys. The morning market tour starts at 6 if you wish to join. Many scholars find it valuable to understand local sourcing immediately. I'll definitely join the market tour, I assured her. Despite my travel fatigue, there was no way I'd miss any opportunity the program offered, especially one involving French market culture. After she left, I unpacked methodically, arranging my chef's knives, each wrapped carefully in protective fabric, on the small desk that would serve as both dining table and workspace. These knives had been my first significant investment when I'd committed to a culinary career, purchased gradually over years as my budget allowed, each one selected for its specific purpose and balance in my hand. Once settled, I stood by the window, taking in the view of the distinctly Parisian rooftops and the slice of neighborhood life visible below. Early evening was descending, the streetlights beginning to glow against the darkening sky. A notification sound pulled me from my reverie, a text from Olivia back home. Landed safely, apartment decent, send pics. I smiled, snapping a few photos of my new space and the view before responding. All good, compact but perfect. Orientation, tomorrow, still feels surreal. Her reply came quickly. You earned this. Remember that when imposter syndrome hits. Call when you can. Love you. As I was about to put my phone away, it buzzed again. This time a message from my mother. Darling, have you arrived? Your father's colleague, Henri Beaumont, has a nephew who works at Le Grand Paris restaurant. I've taken the liberty of sharing your contact. He'll reach out to show you around. So important to have local connections. I stared at the message, feeling the familiar mixture of irritation and resignation. Even from across an ocean, my mother was attempting to manage my experience, to insert family connections where none were needed or requested. The Institute's program was comprehensive, including mentorships and stages at some of Paris's most prestigious establishments. I had no need for the nephew of my father's colleague's tenuous restaurant connection. Rather than engaging in what would inevitably become a circular discussion, I responded simply. Arrived safely. Apartment is perfect. Orientation starts early tomorrow. Will update when I can. Setting my phone to silent, I gathered my few remaining energies to venture out for a simple dinner before jet lag claimed me completely. The neighborhood bistro on the corner proved ideal, unfussy, authentic, and clearly populated by locals, rather than tourists. I ordered in careful French, earning an approving nod from the waiter, then sat back to observe the evening rhythm of my new temporary home. The meal, a perfectly executed coq au vin with silky mashed potatoes, was a reminder of why I'd pursued this path with such determination. Each bite revealed layers of technique, tradition, and deliberate choice. This was food cooked with respect for ingredients and methods, elevated through skill rather than pretension. I savored each mouthful, mentally deconstructing the preparation, while simultaneously surrendering to the pure pleasure of excellence. By the time I returned to my apartment, fatigue had settled deep in my bones, but my mind was alight with anticipation. Tomorrow would be the first day of an experience I'd fought against all odds to achieve. As I drifted toward sleep, I felt profoundly grateful that I'd trusted my passion enough to pursue it, despite every discouragement and dismissal along the way. The morning market tour exceeded every expectation. Our guide, Chef Laurent, a compact, energetic man with quick hands and quicker opinions, led our small group of scholarship recipients through the bustling stalls with the confidence of someone navigating their own living room. He knew every vendor by name, discussing seasonal variations, quality indicators, and proper selection methods for everything from mushrooms to fish to specialized dairy products. Non, not this way, he admonished a tall German student who had picked up a peach incorrectly. You handle fruit comme ça, gently, with respect. It is alive still, non? It continues to change even after picking. I absorbed every detail, asking questions that earned approving nods from Chef Laurent and curious glances from my fellow students. Years of working under Diego's exacting standards had taught me to observe meticulous attention to ingredients, a foundation that was clearly valued in French culinary tradition as well. By the time we arrived at the Institute for formal orientation, I'd already formed tentative connections with several classmates. Aditi from Mumbai, whose specialty was innovative vegetarian concepts, Javier from Mexico City, who had worked in molecular gastronomy, and Sophie from Montreal, whose background in French-Canadian cuisine provided an interesting bridge between new and old-world techniques. The institute itself was both intimidating and invigorating, a converted 19th-century building with soaring ceilings and abundant natural light, modernized with state-of-the-art equipment while maintaining its historical character. The orientation session introduced us to the program structure, faculty, and the demanding expectations that came with our scholarships. "You are not here merely to learn recipes," announced Chef Moreau, the institute's director, a formidable woman whose reputation in the culinary world was legendary. "You are here to understand the philosophy behind French technique, the principles that inform every decision from ingredient selection to plating. We expect excellence, dedication, and the courage to push beyond conventional boundaries." Her words resonated deeply with me. This wasn't just about acquiring skills or credentials. It was about developing a comprehensive culinary philosophy, a distinctive voice within the global conversation of food. The first week passed in a blur of intensive classes, technical, challenges, and adaptation to Parisian rhythms. Each day began before dawn with market visits or preparation sessions, and often extended well into the evening with research tasks or group projects. The pace was relentless but exhilarating, pushing us to our limits while simultaneously opening new horizons of possibility. I found myself thriving under the pressure, my years of practical kitchen experience providing a solid foundation that some of my more academically trained classmates lacked. Where they might excel in theoretical knowledge, I had the muscle memory and instinctive timing that only comes from thousands of hours on the line. "Your knife work is exceptional, Chef Benoit commented during our second butchery session, pausing beside my station to observe my breakdown of a rabbit. "Very efficient, very respectful of the animal. Where did you train before?" "Primarily at Terroir in the States," I explained, maintaining my rhythm as I separated the saddle from the hindquarters. "My mentor there was Diego Vasquez, who trained in Barcelona and New York." "Ah, Diego." Recognition flickered in the chef's eyes. "His approach to protein is unorthodox but precise. I see his influence in your technique. Very good." The casual validation, based purely on observable skill rather than credentials or connections, felt more meaningful than all my family's recent enthusiastic support. This was recognition earned through demonstrated ability, not conferred through association or external markers of prestige. By the end of the second week, I'd settled into a demanding but sustainable routine. Early mornings at markets or in preparation kitchens, daytime classes in technique and theory, evenings spent either in practical application sessions or exploring Paris's diverse culinary landscape. I made a point of trying everything from 3-star Michelin establishments to humble corner bakeries, building a mental catalog of flavors, presentations, and experiences. Communication with home took a secondary priority by necessity. I messaged Olivia regularly with updates and discoveries, exchanged increasingly comfortable texts with Amber about both culinary adventures and everyday Parisian observations, and sent periodic group updates to my parents and Marcus with carefully curated highlights that maintained connection without inviting interference. My mother continued her attempts to help with my Parisian experience, regularly sending contact information for distant connections with tenuous culinary ties, each message implying that these introductions were essential to my success. I acknowledged her efforts politely but non-committally, neither rejecting her overtures nor acting on them. 3 weeks into the program, I received an unexpected message from Marcus. In Paris next week for client meetings. Dinner Tuesday? Can come to your neighborhood or meet somewhere central. Let me know. The prospect of my brother's visit stirred complicated emotions. While part of me welcomed a connection to home, another part was wary of the intrusion into this space I'd carved out independently. Marcus, in particular, had never shown interest in my culinary world until it came with external validation, and his recent fixation on the potential business aspects of my career made me cautious about his motivations. After consideration, I suggested meeting at a mid-range bistro in the 6th arrondissement. Traditional enough to satisfy his expectations of authentic French cuisine, while not so exclusive or trendy that it would become about status or connections. The restaurant was excellent but unpretentious, focusing on impeccably executed classics rather than innovation or scene. When Tuesday arrived, I found myself unexpectedly nervous as I navigated the metro to our meeting spot. This would be my first encounter with family since establishing this new chapter, and I was conscious of wanting to maintain the boundaries I'd set while still preserving relationship. Marcus was already seated when I arrived, looking exactly as he always did, in business settings, tailored suit, immaculate grooming, the confident posture of someone accustomed to commanding attention. The only difference was the setting, a Parisian bistro rather than the high-end American restaurants he typically favored. "Rachel!" He stood as I approached, enveloping me in a brief, cologne-scented hug. "You look different. Very Parisian. Already." I smiled, settling into the chair across from him. "I don't know about that, but I'm adapting well enough. How's the business trip going?" "Productive. Potential acquisition target exceeding projections. Very promising indicators for Q4 integration." He delivered this information with the assumption that I would find it as inherently fascinating as he did, a habit that hadn't changed since childhood. But more importantly, tell me about the program. Living up to expectations? Exceeding them, I replied honestly. The level of instruction is extraordinary, and the access to techniques and perspectives is beyond anything I could have experienced elsewhere. Excellent, excellent. He nodded approvingly, as if my success somehow reflected his judgment. Making good connections? Networking with the right people? There it was. The transactional view of relationships that defined so much of Marcus's approach to life. Even my culinary education was, in his mind, primarily valuable for the connections it might yield. I'm focused on the technical training and developing my culinary philosophy, I said carefully. The relationships are developing naturally through the work. He looked momentarily perplexed, as if I'd described a foreign concept. Sure. But you're attending the industry events, meeting the established chefs? That's where the real opportunities happen. The program includes stages at selected establishments, which provide organic mentorship opportunities, I explained, trying to translate my experience into terms he might understand. It's less about networking events and more about direct professional engagement. The waiter arrived to take our order, providing a welcome interruption. Marcus ordered in atrocious French despite my offer to translate, then switched to discussing the menu in ways that revealed both his limited palate and his desire to appear knowledgeable. The coq au vin is historically a peasant dish, of course, he informed me with the confidence of someone who had read this fact 5 minutes before, on the restaurant's website, but elevated through proper technique. I nodded politely, suppressing the urge to elaborate on the dish's actual evolution or the specific techniques that distinguished exceptional versions from mediocre ones. Marcus had never been interested in the details of my culinary knowledge before my scholarship, and I doubted his apparent interest now extended beyond superficial dinner conversation. Once our food arrived, coq au vin for Marcus, blanquette de veau for me, he returned to the topic of connections and opportunities. I've been thinking more about that restaurant concept we discussed, he said between bites. There's significant Potential in a high-end establishment featuring a Paris-trained chef with innovative Asian-European fusion. I've had preliminary discussions with a few potential investors. I set down my fork, momentarily speechless. Marcus, we never discussed a restaurant concept. You mentioned in passing that one of your clients might be interested in restaurant investments, but I never indicated any interest in pursuing that. He waved dismissively. Details. The point is, there's substantial opportunity here if we position correctly. Your Paris credential, combined with your background and the family narrative, investors love that kind of package. My background? I repeated, a familiar tension building at the base of my skull. You know, the whole underestimated sister makes good angle, from family skeptic to Paris-trained chef. It's compelling storytelling for marketing materials. The casual commodification of what had been years of struggle, dismissal, and determination ignited a slow burn of anger in my chest. My journey, with all its challenges, sacrifices, and hard-won victories, reduced to a marketable angle for his business aspirations. Marcus, I said carefully, measuring each word, I appreciate that you see potential in my career now, but I'm not interested in turning my personal experience into a marketing narrative, particularly not one that glosses over how difficult the family's lack of support made things for many years. He had the momentary grace to look uncomfortable before rallying. No one's suggesting we emphasize the negative aspects. It's about the triumph, the vindication. People love an underdog story. I'm not an underdog story, I said firmly. I'm a chef who worked incredibly hard to develop skills that were finally recognized with this scholarship. And I'm still at the beginning of my professional journey, not looking to capitalize on a narrative arc about family dynamics. Marcus studied me with the calculating expression I recognized from business discussions at family gatherings, assessing angles, identifying, leverage recalibrating approach. You've always been stubborn about doing things your way, he said finally, his tone suggesting this was a character flaw rather than a strength. But eventually, you'll need capital to realize your ambitions. Few chefs succeed without proper business backing. When I'm ready to consider restaurant opportunities, I'll develop a business plan based on culinary vision and sustainable practices, not marketing narratives, I replied. And I'll seek partners who value the food itself, not just its investment potential. A brief silence fell between us, filled with the ambient sounds of the busy restaurant. Marcus took a long sip of his wine, visibly recalibrating. Fine. Maybe it's premature. Focus on your training first, he conceded with the air of someone graciously allowing me to make a decision he still considered misguided. But keep an open mind. The right opportunity with the right backing can make all the difference between a good chef and a successful one. The distinction he drew between good and successful, clearly defining success in purely financial and status terms, crystallized everything about our different values and perspectives. In Marcus's world, skill, passion, and impact were secondary to marketability, profit, and prestige. No wonder he'd dismissed my culinary career until it came with the external validation of a prestigious scholarship. We finished dinner with safer topics, updates on his children's private school achievements, developments in our parents' country club social circle, Amber's recent research publication. Throughout, I maintained polite interest while feeling the distance between our worlds widen with each exchange. It wasn't just geographic miles that separated us now, but fundamentally different values and definitions of what constituted a life well lived. As we parted outside the restaurant, Marcus handed me an envelope. From Mom and Dad, they wanted me to bring it personally. Inside was a card containing a significant sum in euros and a note. For experiences beyond the scholarship provisions, don't limit yourself due to budget constraints. We're so proud of your achievement. The generosity, coming after years of financial withholding when I was genuinely struggling, struck a dissonant chord. Like everything else in their revised approach to my career, it came only after external validation had deemed my path worthy of support. Please thank them for me, I said, tucking the envelope into my bag. Whether I would use the money or not was a decision for later reflection. Marcus hailed a taxi, turning back to me with his practiced business smile. This has been great. I'll let everyone know you're thriving. Keep me updated on your progress. You never know when the right opportunity might materialize. As his taxi pulled away, I stood for a moment on the Parisian sidewalk, pedestrians flowing around me like a stream around a stone. The encounter had left me feeling both unsettled and oddly strengthened in my resolve. My brother's visit, with its focus on potential business angles and marketable narratives, had only reinforced the importance of protecting this experience from family agendas and expectations. Walking back toward the metro, I breathed in the evening air, taking in the distinctive Parisian atmosphere, the blend of history and vibrance, tradition and innovation that made this city the perfect crucible for culinary evolution. This was where I belonged right now, immersed in learning, developing my skills and vision without the distorting lens of family dynamics or commercial pressures. For the first time since arriving in Paris, I felt not just physically distant from my family's complicated influence, but emotionally liberated from their definitions of success and value. The path forward was becoming increasingly clear. Not a rejection of family connection, but a firm establishment of boundaries around my professional development and personal growth. By the time I reached my small apartment, I'd made a decision about the money my parents had sent. I would deposit it in a separate account, neither returning it, which would create unnecessary drama, nor spending it immediately. Perhaps eventually I would use it for a specific professional purpose, specialized equipment, a research trip to another culinary region, or seed money for an independent project. But it would be on my terms, in service of my authentic culinary vision, not theirs. As I prepared for the next day's early market visit, setting out my knives and reviewing notes from recent technique sessions, I felt a deep sense of alignment between my daily actions and my core values. This was the work I'd always believed in, the path I'd fought to pursue despite every discouragement. The external validation of the scholarship hadn't changed who I was or what mattered to me. It had simply created space for me to pursue excellence on my own terms, free from the constant need to justify my choices to skeptical family members. Whether they ever truly understood my passion was becoming increasingly irrelevant to my journey. I was writing my own story now, one technique, one dish, one revelation at a time. The seasons in Paris transformed gradually, summer warmth giving way to crisp autumn, then the distinctive chill of winter, and finally the tender green awakening of spring. As the city cycled through its natural rhythms, my culinary education deepened in ways I couldn't have anticipated. The structured curriculum of technique and theory formed only the foundation. The true education came through immersion, the daily interactions with ingredients, traditions, mentors, and fellow students that reshaped my understanding of food and its cultural significance. 10 months into the program, I stood at a workstation in the Institute's main teaching kitchen, carefully assembling a dish that represented my evolving culinary voice. A reimagined blanquette de veau that honored traditional French technique while incorporating subtle influences from my Chinese heritage. The velvety white sauce remained classical in preparation, but was infused with subtle notes of ginger and star anise. The veal itself was prepared traditionally, but I'd added delicate Shanghai bok choy and replaced the standard rice with pearl. Barley cooked in a technique that married French and Chinese methods. Interesting approach, Mademoiselle Chen. Chef Moreau appeared beside me, observing with her characteristic intensity. The fusion is subtle, not gimmicky. You respect both traditions. Coming from Chef Moreau, whose standards were legendary and whose praise was exceedingly rare, this was remarkable validation. Thank you, Chef. I wanted to find the harmony between techniques rather than simply juxtaposing them. She nodded thoughtfully, watching as I completed the plating with practiced precision. You have developed significantly since your arrival. Not just in technique, but in confidence and vision. The spring showcase will be an important opportunity to present this evolution to a wider audience. The Spring Showcase, the Institute's premier event where second-year students presented original creations to an invited audience of culinary professionals, critics, and potential employers, was still 2 months away, but it loomed large in all our minds. For many students, it would determine post-graduation opportunities and professional trajectories. I've been developing concept ideas, I acknowledged, finding the right balance between innovation and respect for tradition. A balance you seem to navigate intuitively, she observed. Your background gives you a perspective many of your classmates lack. Use it wisely. With a slight nod, she moved on to the next station, leaving me with both the compliment and the implicit challenge it contained. Later that evening, as I walked home through the twilight-softened streets of the 11th arrondissement, I reflected on Chef Moreau's words. My background encompassed many things. My Chinese-American heritage, certainly, but also my years of practical kitchen experience before the Institute, and perhaps most significantly, the journey of pursuing my passion despite family skepticism and dismissal. That particular aspect of my background had become increasingly distant during my time in Paris. Communication with my family had settled into a manageable pattern. Regular but limited updates that maintained connection without inviting intrusion. My mother's efforts to help through tenuous social connections had gradually diminished, replaced by requests for photos of famous Parisian landmarks and restaurants she could share with her friends. My father occasionally inquired about the professional aspects of my training in his characteristically formal way. Marcus had stopped mentioning restaurant investment opportunities after our dinner in Paris, though he frequently referenced my prestigious program in family group chats, as if my accomplishment somehow reflected well on him by association. Only Amber maintained what felt like authentic connection, her messages focusing on my actual experiences and development rather than external markers of success. We'd developed a surprisingly comfortable relationship across the distance, her genuine curiosity about my culinary education matched by my interest in her evolving medical research. The sister who had once kept careful distance from my black sheep status had become my most consistent family support. Approaching my apartment building, I paused to check my phone and found a message from Olivia. Major news. Just got offered. The Seattle position. Moving in 6 weeks. Any chance you can FaceTime tonight to help me freak out appropriately? I smiled, immediately happy for my friend's career advancement while feeling a pang at the thought of her moving even farther from our hometown. Olivia and I had maintained consistent connection despite the time difference and geographic distance, our friendship deepening rather than diminishing through the shared experience of pursuing our respective passions against various obstacles. Once in my apartment, I dropped my bag and immediately called her, eager to celebrate her news. Her face appeared on my screen, familiar features alight with excitement. "Seattle," I exclaimed. "The museum curator position you've been dreaming. About that one?" "The very same." Her grin was infectious. "Full creative control over the Modern Wing's special exhibitions, plus a research budget. I still can't believe they selected me." "I can," I said firmly. "Your exhibition concepts were brilliant, and your thesis publication got attention from all the right people. They're lucky to have you." Our conversation flowed easily between her new opportunity, my recent culinary developments, and the shared language of two friends who understood each other's professional worlds enough to ask meaningful questions while still requiring explanations of specialized concepts. "So the spring showcase is basically your culinary thesis presentation?" Olivia asked as I described my preparation process. "Something like that, but with more immediate professional consequences. Industry people use it to identify talent for recruitment, and the faculty evaluations influence recommendation letters and placement assistance. High pressure," she acknowledged. "What are you thinking of presenting?" I described my evolving concept, a tasting progression that explored the dialogue between traditional French techniques and Asian influences, each course highlighting a specific conversation between culinary traditions without losing the integrity of either. "It sounds amazing," Olivia said with genuine enthusiasm, "and so perfectly you, thoughtful, nuanced, respectful of tradition, but not bound by it." Her understanding of my culinary perspective, formed through years of friendship and countless discussions about food, culture, and identity, contrasted sharply with my family's continued focus on the prestige and connections associated with my training, rather than the actual content of my work. "Have you told your family about the showcase yet?" Olivia asked, reading my expression with the accuracy of long friendship. I shook my head. "Not specifically. They know there's a culminating event, but I haven't emphasized its significance." "Afraid they'll show up and make it about them?" Her directness was one of the things I valued most about our friendship. "Something like that." I sighed, leaning back against my small sofa. "Things have been better since I've been here. The distance helps, but I'm not confident they could attend without somehow making it a Chen family networking event or an opportunity to validate their revised narrative about my career." "Valid. Concern based on past performance," Olivia agreed. "But also, and I'm just putting this out there, maybe they've genuinely evolved in how they see your work. People can change, especially when confronted with irrefutable evidence of their misjudgment." I considered her suggestion seriously. There had been signs of evolution in their perspective, particularly from Amber and occasionally my father. But experience had taught me to be cautious about assuming fundamental changes in family dynamics. "Maybe," I conceded, "but the showcase is already high pressure without adding family complexity. I think it's better to maintain the boundary, for now." Olivia nodded, understanding without judgment. "Trust your instincts. You've navigated the family terrain your whole life. You know the landscape better than anyone." After we disconnected, I found myself reflecting on the various relationships that had shaped my journey. Olivia's unfailing support since our college days, Chef Diego's demanding but genuine mentorship at Terroir, the Institute's instructors who recognized and cultivated talent regardless of background or connections. These people had valued me for my skills, work ethic, and potential, long before external validation made my path acceptable to my family. The next morning, I entered the Institute's specialized pastry kitchen for an advanced techniques seminar, my mind still processing these reflections. The guest instructor was Philippe Moreau, a globally renowned pastry chef whose innovative approach to traditional French techniques had earned him both devotees and critics in the culinary world. "Pastry is precision and poetry in equal measure," he began, his English accented but fluent. "The precision you can learn through repetition and measurement. The poetry, this must come from your own perspective, your own voice." For the next 3 hours, we worked through a series of increasingly complex techniques, each building on fundamental principles while introducing unexpected elements. Chef Philippe moved through the kitchen, offering corrections and occasional nods of approval as we executed delicate sugar work, laminated doughs, and temperature-sensitive emulsions. When he reached my station, he paused to observe my work on a technically demanding millefeuille variation. "Your hands are confident," he commented. "You have done pastry work before the Institute?" "Yes, chef. I was responsible for dessert development at my previous restaurant when our pastry chef left. Self-taught initially, then formal training." He nodded thoughtfully. "It shows. The technical foundation is strong, but there is also intuition, not common in combination." He gestured to my completed puff pastry, which had risen with perfect evenness. "For the showcase, are you considering a pastry element?" I was surprised by his awareness of my specific situation. "I've been focusing on savory concepts, but I've considered a transitional course that bridges savory and sweet." "Consider it seriously," he advised. "Many chefs separate these worlds too distinctly. The integration suggests a more complete culinary perspective." With that cryptic recommendation, he moved to the next station, leaving me to contemplate this new dimension for my showcase concept. The seminar concluded with Chef Philippe selecting 3 student creations for specific commentary. Mine was among them, earning measured praise for technical execution and a challenge to push further with conceptual innovation, a balance of validation and productive criticism that exemplified the Institute's approach to culinary education. As I gathered my tools after class, Sophie from Montreal approached my station. "That was impressive work. Philippe rarely singles out students for positive comments." "Thanks," I replied, cleaning my workstation with the methodical precision that had become second nature. "Your chocolate work was exceptional. I've never seen temper that perfect in high humidity conditions." She smiled, acknowledging the professional compliment. "A few of us are meeting at Café Laurent tonight to discuss showcase concepts. Informal critique session. You should join." The invitation reflected a significant evolution in my peer relationships at the Institute. Initially, the competitive nature of the program had created some distance among scholarship recipients, each of us aware of the limited opportunities available post-graduation. Over time, however, genuine collegial relationships had developed based on mutual respect and recognition of different strengths. "I'd like that," I agreed. 7:30? Perfect. Javier and Aditi are coming too. Maybe Stefan if he finishes his stage shift early enough. The evening gathering proved unexpectedly valuable. Unlike the formal critiques of institute instructors, peer feedback offered different perspectives and challenged assumptions in ways that pushed my concept development in new directions. Javier's background in molecular gastronomy raised questions about texture and temperature contrasts I hadn't fully considered. Aditi's vegetarian perspective highlighted opportunities to elevate plant components beyond mere accompaniments. Sophie's understanding of French-Canadian interpretations of classical technique suggested interesting parallels to my own cross-cultural approach. "Your concept is strong," Stefan concluded, after I'd outlined my current thinking. "But I wonder if you're being too cautious with the Asian influences, keeping them as accents rather than equal participants in the conversation." His observation struck a chord. Was I unconsciously diminishing part of my culinary heritage to make the fusion more palatable to traditional European perspectives? The question resonated beyond just my showcase menu, touching on deeper considerations of cultural authenticity and the courage to present my full culinary voice. Our discussion continued over several hours, moving organically between specific technical questions and broader philosophical considerations about culinary identity and innovation. By the time we parted ways, I had pages of notes and a significantly evolved vision for my showcase presentation. Walking home through nighttime Paris, I felt a sense of community that had been rare in my previous professional experience. Despite our different backgrounds and eventual career goals, we shared a common language of culinary passion and mutual respect that transcended competition. These peers saw and valued my work without the distorting lenses of family history or external validation. They responded to the food itself and the ideas behind it. The following weeks intensified as showcase preparation began in earnest, alongside our regular curriculum. The Institute allocated specific development periods where we could experiment with concepts and techniques under faculty supervision, receiving real-time feedback and technical assistance as needed. During one such session, I was working through the 5th iteration of what had become my signature dish, a conceptually complex but visually minimalist creation that explored the intersection of French and Chinese approaches to texture and temperature. Chef Moreau observed silently for several minutes before offering a rare suggestion. "The concept is sophisticated, the execution nearly flawless," she noted. "But I wonder if you are holding something back, some personal element that would make this distinctly yours rather than merely an excellent academic exercise." Her comment echoed Stefan's earlier observation, suggesting a pattern I needed to address. "I've been concerned about maintaining technique integrity while introducing cross-cultural elements," I admitted. "Perhaps being too careful about respecting traditions." She considered this with characteristic thoughtfulness. Respect is necessary, but courage is also required. The most compelling culinary voices honor tradition while advancing it through personal perspective. Your journey to this point, what does it tell you about innovation versus tradition? The question lingered with me long after the session ended. My journey had been defined by persisting in my passion, despite being told it wasn't valuable or viable, finding ways to honor the craft while forging my own path. Why was I now hesitating to fully express my culinary perspective, the unique voice that had emerged from that very journey? That evening, I received an unexpected email from my father. The subject line was simply news, and the message characteristically brief. Your mother and I are considering a trip to Paris in early May. Potentially could coincide with your spring event if appropriate. Please advise if this timing would be convenient. I stared at the screen, a complex swirl of emotions rising in response to this seemingly straightforward inquiry. The careful phrasing, if appropriate, would be convenient, suggested an awareness of boundaries I hadn't expected from my father. This wasn't a declaration of attendance or an assumption of welcome, but an actual request for my preference. My immediate instinct was protective, to maintain the separation between my institute experience and family dynamics that had allowed me to develop without the weight of their judgment or the distraction of their revised narrative. The showcase represented the culmination of intensive professional growth that had occurred largely without their involvement or understanding. Yet I also recognized that this request represented its own kind of growth, my father reaching across the distance, acknowledging my agency in determining their involvement rather than simply imposing it. This was not the same man who had dismissed my culinary aspirations as a waste of potential, who had withheld support until external validation made my path acceptable in his eyes. After considerable reflection, I drafted a careful response. The spring showcase is May 15-17. My presentation is scheduled for the 16th at 2 p.m. It's primarily a professional event, but a limited number of family members are permitted to attend the presentations. If you decide to come to Paris during this time, I would be willing to have you attend, though my availability for additional activities will be very limited due to showcase preparations. The boundary was clear but not rejecting, acknowledging the possibility of their presence while establishing realistic expectations about its nature and limitations. I hesitated before sending it, reminding myself that I was no longer the desperate-for-approval daughter who would have once accommodated any family request, regardless of its impact on my well-being or professional development. Hitting send, I felt a curious blend of anxiety and empowerment. Whatever their response, I had maintained my integrity while leaving space for potential evolution in our relationship. The decision reflected my growth not just as a chef, but as a person who understood her own worth independent of family validation. The reply came the following morning, again from my father rather than my mother, which was itself unusual for family communications. Thank you for the information. We will make arrangements accordingly and respect your schedule constraints. Your mother suggests dinner after your presentation if you feel that would be appropriate. Please advise accommodation recommendations when convenient. The measured tone and acknowledgement of boundaries represented a dramatic departure from previous family interactions. Whether this reflected genuine growth in their perspective or simply strategic adaptation to my increased independence was impossible to determine from an email. Either way, it signaled a shift in dynamic that both intrigued and cautioned me. I shared the development with Olivia during our next call, seeking her outside perspective. It sounds like they're actually trying, she observed after hearing both messages. The phrasing is almost painfully formal, but your dad seems to be making an effort to respect your autonomy. That's what surprised me, I admitted. No assumptions, no immediate attempt to expand their visit into a larger family narrative, just a straightforward inquiry and acceptance of my parameters. People can evolve, Olivia reminded me, especially when confronted with the undeniable success of someone they underestimated. Maybe seeing you thrive independently has forced some reconsideration. Maybe, I conceded. Or maybe they've just adapted their approach to my changed circumstances. Either way, I guess I'll find out in May. The possibility of my parents attending the showcase added another layer of complexity to an already intense preparation period. In quieter moments between development sessions and regular coursework, I found myself considering how their presence might affect my presentation. Would I unconsciously modify my culinary expression to meet their expectations or avoid potential criticism? Would their observation, after so many years of dismissal and recent months of awkward enthusiasm, influence my confidence or focus? These questions accompanied me into the Institute's experimental kitchen the following week, where I was refining the transitional course that would bridge the savory and sweet portions of my tasting progression. Chef Philippe's suggestion to explore this intersection had inspired a conceptually challenging creation, a dish that incorporated traditional French pastry technique with Chinese tea service elements, creating a sensory experience that was neither fully savory nor conventionally sweet. As I worked through the delicate balance of flavors and textures, Chef Moreau appeared beside my station, observing in thoughtful silence before speaking. "You have found something here," she noted, gesturing to the component layout. "There is more confidence in this composition, more willingness to express personal perspective. I've been considering our conversation about courage versus caution," I explained, trying to honor traditions while fully embracing my unique viewpoint. She nodded approvingly. "The result is more compelling, not merely skilled execution, but distinctive voice." She examined the tea-infused pastry cream I was preparing, noting the subtle integration of jasmine and oolong. "This is the work of a chef developing signature perspective, not just a capable student." Her validation of this evolution in my approach resonated deeply. Throughout my culinary journey, I had sought to prove my legitimacy through technical perfection and respect for tradition. But true culinary distinction came not just from mastering established techniques, but from developing the confidence to express personal vision through them. Perhaps this was the most valuable lesson of my time at the Institute, not just the acquisition of skills and knowledge, but the development of authentic voice and the courage to express it fully. This growth had occurred largely because I'd been able to focus on internal standards rather than external validation, sheltered from the complicated dynamics of family expectations and perceptions. Now, with the possibility of my parents witnessing this culmination, I faced a test of this newly strengthened identity. Would I maintain my culinary integrity and authentic expression, or would I revert to the approval-seeking patterns that had characterized so much of my early relationship with them? As I completed the component assembly and evaluated the final composition, I made a quiet but firm decision. My showcase presentation would be a full expression of my culinary voice, not modified to meet anyone's expectations or avoid potential criticism, not calibrated to win specific approval or validation. It would represent my genuine perspective as a chef at this moment in my development, honoring all the influences and experiences that had shaped it. Whether my parents could truly see and appreciate this expression was, ultimately, beyond my control. What remained within my power was the integrity of my own work and the authenticity of my culinary voice. That, I realized, was the true measure of my growth. Not their approval or understanding, but my own unwavering commitment to the path I had fought so hard to pursue. Paris in May carried a haunting beauty, soft light filtering through tender green leaves, the city awakening fully from winter's grip. Yet I barely registered the seasonal poetry as Showcase Week descended upon the Institute, bringing with it the culmination of everything I'd worked toward since that transformative lottery ticket purchase back in Seattle. The Institute's kitchens had been reconfigured into presentation theaters where each graduating scholar would execute their ultimate creations before an audience that could determine career trajectories. Industry luminaries, Michelin critics, restaurateurs, and a carefully controlled number of personal guests would witness 18 months of intensive training distilled into a single performance. I moved through final preparations with methodical precision, each component of my 5-course progression checked, rechecked, and organized according to workflows rehearsed countless times. My mise en place reflected not just meticulous organization, but the evolution of my culinary voice, bridging French technique with Asian influences in ways that honored both traditions without reducing either to mere accent. Nervous? Aditi asked, observing me label the final container of specialty sauce. Or just laser-focused as usual? Both, I admitted, glancing at the clock that marked 48 hours until my presentation. Although I think the nerves are more about my parents coming than the professional evaluation. She nodded with understanding. During months of shared work and occasional confidences, my closest classmates had learned enough about my family history to recognize the complexity this represented. They're going to witness something they've never seen before, she pointed out. You in your element, commanding respect from people who understand what you do. Her observation resonated deeply. My parents had attended countless presentations throughout my siblings' careers, Marcus's investment pitches, Amber's medical conferences, but had never witnessed me in a professional context they considered legitimate. Tomorrow would mark the first time they'd see me as peers in my field saw me, a chef with distinctive vision and recognized talent. The evening before presentations began, I sat in my small apartment reviewing notes, visualizing each sequence, mentally preparing for the scrutiny of both professional critics and familial observers. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. We've arrived in Paris. Hope you're preparing well for tomorrow. Looking forward to finally understanding what your everyday work involves. The phrasing struck me, finally understanding rather than proud to see or similar platitudes. Their previous enthusiasm had been tied to external validation. This felt more like genuine curiosity about my actual work. I responded simply, looking forward to showing you. Presentation is at 2 p.m. Arrive 15 minutes early for orientation. Settling for the night, I allowed myself a moment of reflection on the journey that had led to this point. Years of family dismissal, the loneliness of pursuing passion without support, the gradual development of confidence in my own judgment, rather than seeking validation from those who couldn't see the legitimacy of my chosen path. And now, in one performance, multiple narratives would converge. My professional development, their belated acknowledgement, and my own relationship with success defined on my terms rather than theirs. Morning arrived with crystalline clarity. I entered the institute before dawn, joining fellow scholars in silent, focused preparation. The kitchen hummed with concentrated energy as we set up stations, arranged tools, and completed final mise and place under the watchful supervision of our instructors. Chef Moreau moved through the space with her characteristic authority, offering brief technical reminders and subtle encouragements. Remember, you are demonstrating not merely competence, but vision. Execute with confidence in the voice you have developed. By noon, the institute buzzed with activity as industry professionals began arriving, moving between stations to observe various presentations throughout the day. I caught glimpses of several prominent chefs whose work I'd studied extensively, critics whose opinions shaped careers, restaurateurs whose establishments defined excellence in the field. At 1:45, as I made final adjustments to my station, I noticed my parents entering the main showcase area, guided by an institute coordinator. My mother wore an elegant navy dress that wouldn't look out of place at one of their corporate functions, while my father maintained his customary formal bearing despite the creative environment. They looked simultaneously prepared and completely out of their element. Our eyes met briefly across the room. They offered small waves of acknowledgement, which I returned before refocusing on my preparations. Their presence registered as fact rather than distraction. one element in a complex professional event that would be defined by many other, more relevant factors. At precisely 2 o'clock, Chef Moreau introduced me to the assembled observers. Her introduction was characteristically precise, noting my technical foundation, conceptual development, and the distinctive fusion perspective I'd cultivated. Then the moment arrived. I began my presentation with steady hands and clear voice, moving through the first course, a delicate interpretation of Chinese 5-spice duck prepared using classical French confiding technique, served with a modern reduction that bridged soy and Bordelaise traditions. As I worked, I explained my conceptual framework, maintaining professional engagement with observers while executing complex preparations. From my peripheral awareness, I noted my parents watching with expressions I couldn't quite interpret. Were they beginning to understand the skill involved? The years of training required to execute these techniques with the precision expected at this level? The creativity demanded to develop original compositions that still honored traditional foundations? The progression continued through 5 courses, each building on the previous while introducing new elements to the dialogue between culinary traditions. My movements were confident, my explanations articulate, my execution precisely calibrated to the exacting standards the Institute demanded. This was work I'd fought years to pursue, refined through countless hours of practice, expressed with the authentic voice I'd developed despite every dismissal and doubt. The transitional course, a technically demanding creation that bridged savory and sweet elements using innovative pastry techniques infused with tea service traditions, earned visible approval from several prominent chefs in attendance. Questions from observers became more engaged, their inquiries revealing professional respect for the complexity I was presenting. Throughout the execution, I maintained dual awareness, focused primarily on the technical and creative demands of the presentation while peripherally noting my parents' reactions. They watched with attention that seemed different from their typical social monitoring, though whether they truly understood what they were observing remained unclear. The final course completed my conceptual narrative, a composition that synthesized the progression's themes into a unified statement about the possibility of authentic dialogue between distinct culinary traditions. As I presented the last plates to the evaluation panel, I felt the particular satisfaction of expressing creative vision according to my highest standards, regardless of whether everyone present could fully appreciate its nuances. Chef Moreau approached my station as the formal presentation concluded. Executed with precision and presented with conviction, she noted in measured approval. You have found your voice and demonstrated it effectively. Her validation, based purely on demonstrated excellence rather than external credentials, felt like the appropriate culmination of my institute experience. I had arrived as a talented but uncertain scholarship recipient, still carrying the weight of years of family dismissal. I was graduating as a chef with clarified vision and recognized skill, defined by my work rather than others' assessment of its value. As professional observers dispersed to other presentations, my parents approached my station. My mother spoke. First, her usual social polish momentarily absent. Rachel, I don't have adequate vocabulary to describe what we just witnessed. The complexity alone, but beyond that, the way you explained your thinking, your creative process. My father nodded, his reserve softened by what appeared to be genuine revelation. I understood perhaps a fraction of the technical elements you described, but the reactions from the other chefs made the significance clear. The level of mastery required. They stood before me as admitted novices, acknowledging expertise they couldn't fully comprehend but could no longer dismiss. Years of dismissing my cooking dreams as impractical had given way to recognition of a professional reality they hadn't imagined existed. Thank you for coming, I said simply, continuing to clean my station with professional efficiency. It's illuminating to see the actual work rather than just hearing about it in the abstract. Profoundly illuminating, my father acknowledged. I should have sought this understanding years ago. I made assumptions based on my own limited framework, rather than attempting to understand yours. Their admission reflected a shift more significant than the belated enthusiasm following my scholarship announcement. This wasn't about external validation making my path acceptable. It was about recognizing the legitimacy of excellence outside their familiar metrics. Chef Moreau reappeared with a distinguished older woman I recognized as Marie Dubois, whose restaurant consultancy had placed chefs at some of Europe's most innovative establishments. Mademoiselle Chen, Madame Dubois, was particularly interested in your transitional course concept and would like to discuss potential collaboration on an upcoming project. The professional opportunity this represented, direct engagement with a leader who could shape culinary careers, momentarily overshadowed the family dynamics playing out beside my station. I would be honored to discuss it further. My mother, ever attuned to social dynamics, recognized the significance immediately. We should allow you to pursue this opportunity. Perhaps we could meet briefly tomorrow, just for coffee? The proposed alternative, a focused interaction rather than the extended family networking she might once have suggested, represented unexpected awareness of my professional reality. 10 o'clock at Café Laurent would work well. They withdrew, with surprising recognition of the professional context, allowing me to engage with Madame Dubois about a collaboration that could significantly impact my post-graduation trajectory. The following 2 hours unfolded in intensive professional networking, detailed discussions with established chefs about technique and philosophy, questions from food writers about my conceptual approach, and most significantly, the conversation with Madame Dubois about joining a team developing a new restaurant concept that would explicitly explore cross-cultural culinary dialogue. The opportunity aligned perfectly with my vision and would provide the ideal next step after graduation. By the time the reception concluded near midnight, I had established foundations for multiple professional possibilities, each representing recognition of my distinctive voice rather than generic credentials. Exhausted but deeply satisfied, I returned to my apartment with the day's complexities still processing. My phone showed messages that captured various perspectives on the event. From Olivia. Saw the Institute's social posts. Those compositions. That execution. I'm officially intimidated by your talent level. Call when you can breathe again. From Chef Diego. Received preliminary videos. Your growth is unmistakable. Your vision clear. This is what I knew you could achieve with proper training and support. Exceptional work. From Amber. Dad called completely stunned by your presentation. I think he finally grasps that he didn't grasp it before. Significant progress. These validations from people who had recognized my potential long before external credentials made it acceptable felt particularly meaningful. They had valued my work for its intrinsic quality when my path lacked prestigious affirmation. Morning brought the particular clarity that follows profound professional experiences. Whatever specific opportunities emerged from yesterday's showcase, I had demonstrated my capabilities at the highest level, confirming the legitimacy of the path I'd pursued despite dismissal and doubt. I arrived at Café Laurent precisely at 10, finding my parents already seated, their typical tourist maps replaced by notebooks that suggested they'd been genuinely processing yesterday's experience. We've been discussing what we witnessed. My mother began directly, her usual indirect approach absent, trying to understand not just what you do, but how significantly we misunderstood it previously. My father nodded, continuing with uncharacteristic openness. I evaluated your career choice using metrics from my professional context: corporate advancement, financial stability, conventional prestige. I couldn't assess what I didn't understand, but lacked the humility to recognize that limitation. Their acknowledgement went beyond mere revision of opinion. This was recognition of fundamental errors in judgment, admission of perspectives they'd held without adequate foundation. What changed your understanding? I asked, genuinely curious about this evolution. Was it just seeing the showcase, or something broader? They exchanged a glance that suggested prior discussion. My mother responded thoughtfully. It began with the scholarship announcement, which forced initial reconsideration. But real change came through conversations with Amber, who challenged us to examine why we could only value your path once it received external validation. And yesterday provided irrefutable demonstration, my father added, not just of your technical skill, but of an entire professional ecosystem we hadn't imagined, with its own rigorous standards, creative challenges, and recognized authorities. This frank assessment, without defensiveness or revision of history, created space for something I hadn't thought possible: authentic reconciliation based on truth rather than convenient narratives. I appreciate your honesty, I said carefully. The past cannot be undone, but this recognition opens possibilities for different engagement going forward. We can't change our failure to support your journey, my mother acknowledged, but perhaps we can understand it better from this point. Whatever direction your career takes, we want to engage with it on its own terms. Their approach, offering recognition without demanding forgiveness, acknowledging limitations without excessive apology, respected my experience while expressing genuine desire for evolved relationship. Our conversation shifted to more immediate matters: their Parisian experiences, the opportunity Madame Dubois had presented, Amber's recent academic achievements. The dynamic felt more balanced than any family interaction I could remember, characterized by mutual interest rather than hierarchical assessment. As we prepared to part, my father hesitated before asking, "Would it be appropriate for us to experience your professional work directly if this opportunity with Madame Dubois develops? To better understand your craft in its proper context?" The request reflected both genuine interest and implicit acknowledgement that access to my professional world required invitation rather than assumption. Recognition of these new terms, based on respect rather than obligatory family connection, felt like authentic progress. "I'd welcome that," I replied honestly. Experiencing the food directly communicates things conversations never could. Walking to my afternoon meetings, I felt a sense of alignment with my family I'd never previously experienced. Not resolution of all past hurts, not complete understanding of my culinary vision, but authentic recognition of previous limitations and genuine interest in engaging more thoughtfully. This realistic reconciliation felt appropriate to who I'd become during my professional journey. No longer measuring my worth by their assessment, no longer desperate for approval I'd built my career without, I could engage from a position of strength rather than need. The afternoon brought confirmation from Madame Dubois, a formal offer to join her team developing a new restaurant concept, specifically exploring cross-cultural culinary innovation. The opportunity represented perfect alignment with my vision and provided exactly the professional challenge I'd prepared for. Returning to my apartment that evening, I reflected on the extraordinary distance traveled. From uncertain culinary student defending career choices against family dismissal, to recognized chef with elite opportunities and transformed family dynamics. The journey had taught that success defined on one's own terms, work aligned with personal values, executed to highest standards, expressing authentic voice, provides fulfillment, external validation cannot match. My family's recognition was welcome but not essential to my sense of achievement. As Parisian twilight settled, I began conceptualizing signature dishes for my new position, creative process flowing with confidence and clarity. Traditional foundations supported innovative concepts. Disparate culinary languages found harmonious dialogue through my distinctive interpretation. This was the real success story. Not that dismissive family members suddenly sought association with achievement, but that I'd maintained faith in my passion despite their initial rejection. Not that prestigious credentials eventually validated my path, but that I'd built genuine skill whether externally acknowledged or not. Not that I could now claim elite connections, but that I'd developed authentic voice those connections recognized as valuable. I was no longer the family disappointment seeking vindication through achievement. I was a chef with clear vision, navigating opportunities based on demonstrated excellence rather than familial expectations. If my family chose to understand and appreciate this evolution, it represented their growth more than mine. My phone chimed with a message from Olivia. Just booked Paris tickets for graduation week. Need to witness this culinary magic before you get too famous to remember ordinary friends. I smiled at her characteristic support, responding, as if I could forget the person who believed in my dreams when everyone else called them impractical. You get permanent VIP status. This was my story's real epilogue, not family members begging association with success, but recognition that genuine support had always come from those who valued my passion before external validation made it acceptable. Olivia's unwavering friendship, Chef Diego's demanding mentorship, Amber's evolving advocacy. These authentic connections sustained me through years of doubt. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as I began the next phase of my culinary journey, in a professional environment that explicitly valued innovation and cross-cultural dialogue. Whatever evolution lay ahead, I would face it with confidence in my voice and clarity about my worth, independent of approval or recognition. The true inspiration wasn't that skeptical family members now wanted connection to my success. It was discovering success defined in personal terms, work expressing authentic vision, relationships offering genuine recognition, and unshakable knowledge that I'd been right to trust my passion all along. Standing in my small Parisian kitchen, I felt profound gratitude, not just for the opportunities emerging, but for the journey that had brought me to this point of clarity and strength. Tomorrow, I would begin creating at a level I'd always envisioned, surrounded by peers who understood and valued my distinctive approach. The family dynamics had evolved from dismissal to recognition, but that wasn't the central story. The central story was about maintaining faith in authentic vision, developing genuine expertise despite doubt, and building a career defined by personal standards rather than external approval. As I prepared for what would be my last night in the small apartment that had witnessed months of intense growth, I smiled at the reflection in the window. A chef who had fought for her dreams and was now positioned to express them at the highest level. The path forward was clear, the voice was strong, and the confidence was real. Whatever success came next would be built on this foundation of authentic development and personal integrity. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.